Billionaire sees a man collapse in his factory, then finds his own birth certificate in his bag. The fluorescent lights of Grand Industries' main production floor hummed with a steady, almost hypnotic rhythm. Sophia Grant, CEO and sole owner, stood on the elevated observation platform, her sharp blue eyes scanning the activity below. She was a woman in her late 50s, her silver-streak hair pulled back in a tight bun, her tailored suit emphasizing a figure kept trim by daily workouts and a disciplined diet. Years of building her manufacturing empire from the ground up had etched lines of determination around her mouth. But today, a faint smile played on her lips. The new line of energy-efficient appliances was exceeding all projections, and the factory was buzzing with the energy of success. Sophia had always been a hands-on CEO. She knew the names of most of her employees, understood the intricacies of the machinery, and wasn't afraid to get her hands dirty. She believed in leading by example, and her employees respected her for it, even if they sometimes found her demanding. She had a reputation for being tough but fair. The factory floor was a symphony of organized chaos. Forklifts whizzed by, carrying pallets of components. Robotic arms assembled parts with precise movements. Workers in blue uniforms, their faces focused on their tasks, moved with practiced efficiency. The air smelled of metal, oil, and the faint, sweet scent of the specialized lubricant used on the assembly line. Among the workers was Arthur Miller, an elderly man with thinning gray hair and a slight stoop. He worked on the quality control line, meticulously inspecting each finished appliance for defects. Arthur was a quiet, unassuming man, well-liked by his colleagues for his gentle nature and dry wit. He'd been with Grand Industries for almost 2 years, and his attendance record was impeccable. He was a reliable, if somewhat slow, worker, and Sophia appreciated his dedication. She made a mental note to commend him during her next all-hands meeting. Arthur felt a sudden, sharp pain in his chest, like a vice tightening around his heart. He gasped, dropping the appliance he was holding. It clattered to the floor, the noise momentarily disrupting the rhythmic hum of the factory. He tried to call out, but his voice was a strangled whisper. His vision blurred, and the world tilted sideways. He felt himself falling, the concrete floor rushing up to meet him. Sophia saw the commotion from the observation platform. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of immediate concern. She saw Arthur collapse, and her instincts kicked in. Years of managing crises had trained her to react quickly and decisively. "Call an ambulance," she shouted, her voice cutting through the noise. "And get the on-site nurse down here stat." She descended the stairs 2 at a time, her heels clicking sharply on the metal steps. She reached Arthur's side just as several other workers were gathering around him, their faces etched with worry. "Give him some space," Sophia ordered, her voice firm but not unkind. "Has anyone checked his pulse?" A young woman, Sarah, who worked on the same line as Arthur, knelt beside him. "It's weak, MS. Grant, but it's there." Sophia knelt down, her gaze assessing Arthur's pale face and shallow breathing. She gently touched his forehead. It was clammy and cold. The on-site nurse, a middle-aged woman named Brenda, arrived carrying a first aid kit. "Heart attack, most likely," Brenda said after a quick examination. "We need to keep him stable until the ambulance arrives." Sophia nodded, her mind already racing. She needed to find out who Arthur was, if he had any medical conditions, and who to contact in case of an emergency. "Someone check his wallet for ID and any emergency contact information," Sophia instructed, "and see if he has a locker. There might be something in there." Sarah volunteered to search Arthur's bag, a worn canvas satchel that he always carried with him. Sophia focused on keeping Arthur comfortable, talking to him in soothing tones, even though he was unconscious. She held his hand, a gesture that surprised even herself. She wasn't known for her outward displays of emotion, but the sight of this elderly man, so vulnerable and frail, had touched something deep within her. The ambulance siren wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sophia hoped it wouldn't be too late. The paramedics arrived swiftly, their efficient movements a stark contrast to the anxious stillness that had fallen over the factory floor. They quickly assessed Arthur's condition, administered oxygen, and prepared him for transport. Sophia watched, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. She felt a knot of tension in her stomach, a mixture of concern for Arthur and the unsettling disruption to her carefully orchestrated schedule. As the paramedics wheeled Arthur out on a stretcher, Sarah approached Sophia, holding Arthur's canvas bag. "Ms. Grant, I found his wallet and some papers in his bag. There's not much, but..." Sophia took the bag, her fingers brushing against the worn fabric. It felt strangely personal, holding this object that belonged to the unconscious man. She opened the bag and pulled out a battered leather wallet. Inside, she found a driver's license identifying him as Arthur Miller, an address in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of town, and a few crumpled dollar bills. There was no emergency contact listed. "Check the rest of the bag, Sarah," Sophia said, her voice tight. "There has to be something." Sarah rummaged through the bag's contents. There were a few everyday items: a well-worn paperback novel, a small thermos, a half-eaten packet of crackers, a pair of reading glasses, and then, tucked into a side pocket, a folded piece of paper. Sarah carefully unfolded the paper. It was a birth certificate, yellowed with age and creased from years of being folded and unfolded. The heading read, "State of Illinois, Department of Public Health, Certificate of Live Birth." Sarah's eyes scanned the document, and then she gasped. "Ms. Grant, you need to see this." Sophia took the birth certificate, her brow furrowed. She read the information, her eyes widening in disbelief. The child's name, Sophia Eleanor Grant. Date of birth, her own birthday. Place of birth, the same hospital where she had been born. Mother's name, Eleanor Rose Thompson, her maiden name before she married. Father's name, Arthur David Miller. The blood drained from Sophia's face. Her hands trembled, the paper crinkling in her grip. It couldn't be. This was impossible. Her father was Richard Grant, the wealthy, influential businessman who had raised her, who had given her everything. He had died 5 years ago, leaving her his entire empire. This Arthur Miller was a stranger. But the date, the hospital, her mother's maiden name, it all matched. A cold wave of nausea washed over her. She felt a dizzying sense of unreality, as if the solid ground beneath her feet had suddenly given way. Sophia looked back at the birth certificate, her eyes fixated on the father's name, Arthur David Miller. The same name as the man lying unconscious in the ambulance, the man she had just sent to the hospital. She felt a prickling sensation on her skin, a growing sense of unease. It was too much of a coincidence, but it was also preposterous. Her mother had always been so proper, so concerned with social standing. Arthur Miller, from what she had seen, was a simple, working-class man. It didn't fit. Sophia's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. She needed to talk to her mother. She needed answers. But more than that, she needed to see Arthur, to look into his eyes and see if there was any flicker of recognition, any hint of the truth that this faded piece of paper seemed to proclaim. "Sarah," Sophia said, her voice shaking slightly, "stay here and keep things running. I need to go to the hospital." She didn't wait for a reply. She grabbed her purse and keys, her mind already replaying the events of the past hour, trying to find a logical explanation, a way to dismiss this unsettling discovery. But deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted, and she knew that she wouldn't rest until she had unearthed the truth. The humming of the factory faded behind her as she rushed out, the birth certificate clutched tightly in her hand, a silent testament to a past she never knew existed. The sterile, antiseptic smell of the hospital waiting room filled Sophia's nostrils, a familiar scent that always brought a wave of unease. She hated hospitals. They were places of sickness, pain, and uncertainty. She sat stiffly in a plastic chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the closed doors of the emergency room. She had called ahead, informing the hospital staff that she was Arthur Miller's employer and would be responsible for his medical expenses. This had earned her a slightly more attentive reception, but it didn't alleviate the gnawing anxiety that churned in her gut. The waiting room was sparsely populated. A young couple huddled together, their faces etched with worry. An elderly woman sat alone, flipping through a magazine with trembling hands. The muted sounds of a television, tuned to a daytime talk show, filled the silence. Sophia tried to focus on her work, pulling out her phone and scrolling through emails, but her mind kept returning to the birth certificate, to the impossible revelation it contained. She replayed the image of Arthur's face, his pale skin, his closed eyes. Was it possible? Could this man, this stranger, really be her father? A doctor, a young woman with tired eyes and a kind smile, finally emerged from the emergency room. "MS. Grant?" she asked. Sophia stood up quickly, her heart pounding. "Yes. How is he?" "Mr. Miller suffered a mild heart attack," the doctor explained. "We've stabilized him, and he's resting comfortably now. He's been asking for you," the doctor added. Sophia was stunned into silence. So he was asking for her? She regained herself. "Oh, of course, doctor. He's still quite weak, so I'd ask you to keep the visit brief. He's in room 302. Sophia nodded, her mind racing. "Thank you, doctor." She walked down the long corridor, her footsteps echoing on the polished floor. Each step felt heavy, laden with the weight of the unknown. She reached room 302 and hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. She took a deep breath, trying to compose herself, to steel herself for whatever lay ahead. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room was small and dimly lit. Arthur lay in the bed, his eyes closed, his face pale against the white sheets. He looked even frilier than he had on the factory floor. An IV drip was attached to his arm, and a heart monitor beeped steadily beside the bed. Sophia approached the bed slowly, her eyes fixed on Arthur's face. She studied his features, searching for some resemblance, some familiar trait that would confirm the impossible truth of the birth certificate. She saw the high forehead, the shape of his nose, the faint curve of his lips, and a flicker of recognition sparked within her. It was subtle, but it was there, a ghost of a memory, a feeling of familiarity that she couldn't explain. She pulled up a chair and sat beside the bed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She waited, watching him, her heart aching with a mixture of confusion, fear, and a strange, unfamiliar longing. The minutes ticked by, the silence broken only by the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Sophia felt a tear roll down her cheek, a tear she couldn't explain, a tear for a man she didn't know, a man who might be her father. Arthur's eyelids fluttered open. He blinked slowly, his gaze unfocused, his eyes struggling to adjust to the dim light of the room. He saw Sophia sitting beside his bed, her face blurred and indistinct. He felt a wave of weakness wash over him, a lingering reminder of the pain that had gripped his chest. "Sophia," he whispered, his voice raspy and weak. Hearing her name on his lips, spoken with such familiarity, sent a shiver down Sophia's spine. She leaned closer, her heart pounding in her chest. "Arthur," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm here." Arthur's gaze slowly focused on her face. He studied her features, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain, confusion, and something else, a deep, abiding sadness. "You came?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Of course I came," Sophia replied. "You were hurt. I had to make sure you were all right." Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, gathering his strength. He took a shallow breath, and then he spoke again, his words barely a whisper, but each one a hammer blow to Sophia's carefully constructed reality. "Sophia, I'm your father." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Her mind recoiled, rejecting the statement with every fiber of her being. "No," she said, her voice sharp and firm. "That's not possible. You're mistaken." Arthur opened his eyes again, his gaze pleading. "Please, Sophia, listen to me. No. Sophia insisted, her voice rising. My father was Richard Grant. He died 5 years ago. You're delirious. The medication, the heart attack. She stood up abruptly, pushing the chair back, her hands shaking. She couldn't breathe. She needed to get out of the room, away from this man, away from this impossible truth. Sophia, please. Arthur reached out a trembling hand towards her, his eyes filled with tears. But Sophia couldn't bear to look at him. She turned and fled the room, her heart pounding, her mind reeling. She rushed down the corridor, ignoring the curious glances of the nurses and other patients. She needed air. She needed to think. She burst out of the hospital doors and into the bright sunlight, gasping for breath. She leaned against the brick wall of the building, her body trembling. The cool air helped to clear her head, but the confusion and denial remained, swirling inside her like a tempest. No, it can't be true, she thought fiercely. My father was Richard Grant, a powerful, respected man. This Arthur, he's just a factory worker. She remembered her childhood, the lavish birthday parties, the expensive gifts, the private schools. Richard Grant had given her everything. He had been a demanding, sometimes distant father, but he had loved her in his own way. He had been her father. This Arthur, with his whispered confession and his pleading eyes, he was a stranger. A stranger who was trying to insert himself into her life, to claim a connection that didn't exist. Sophia pulled out her phone and dialed her mother's number. Eleanor Grant answered on the second ring, her voice cool and controlled. Sophia? What is it? I'm in the middle of a meeting. Mother, I need to talk to you. It's about my father. Eleanor sighed, a sound of weary exasperation. Sophia, we've been over this. Your father is gone. What more is there to discuss? There's a man at the hospital. He collapsed at the factory. He claims he's my father. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Sophia could hear her mother's sharp intake of breath. What? Eleanor's voice was barely a whisper. His name is Arthur Miller. He had a birth certificate with my name on it, and yours, and his. Another silence, even longer this time. Sophia could almost feel her mother's mind working, calculating, trying to find a way to control the situation. Sophia, Eleanor said finally, her voice regaining its usual composure. This is ridiculous. The man is clearly delusional. Don't listen to him. He's probably trying to scam you. But the birth certificate, it's a forgery, Sophia. A pathetic attempt to get money from you. You're a wealthy woman. People will try anything. Sophia wanted to believe her mother. She needed to believe her. But the image of Arthur's face, his earnest expression, his whispered words, they haunted her. I don't know, Mother, Sophia said, her voice wavering. He seems so sincere. Sophia, please, Eleanor said, her voice sharper now. Don't be foolish. This man is nothing to you. Forget about him. Let the hospital deal with him. He's their problem, not yours. Sophia hesitated. Her mother's words were logical, persuasive. But a nagging doubt remained, a tiny voice whispering in the back of her mind, urging her to dig deeper, to uncover the truth. I need some time to think, Sophia said finally. Just promise me you won't do anything rash, Sophia, Eleanor said. Promise me you won't let this con man manipulate you. I promise, Sophia said, but even as she said the words, she knew that she couldn't keep that promise. She couldn't simply dismiss Arthur's claim. She needed to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. She hung up the phone, feeling more confused and conflicted than ever. She looked back at the hospital entrance, her mind torn between her mother's reassurances and the unsettling possibility that her entire life had been built on a lie. Sophia drove home in a daze, the city streets blurring into an indistinct landscape. Her mind was a whirlwind of conflicting emotions, disbelief, anger, confusion, and a growing sense of unease. Her mother's words echoed in her ears, delusional, con man, forgery, but they couldn't completely silence the nagging doubt that had taken root in her heart. She arrived at her sprawling, modern home overlooking the Pacific. The house, a testament to her success, usually brought her a sense of peace and accomplishment. But tonight, it felt empty and cold, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil raging within her. She poured herself a glass of wine, her hand trembling slightly. She needed to calm down, to think clearly. She needed to figure out a way to approach this situation logically, to find a way to disprove Arthur's claim and put her mind at ease. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that she couldn't simply dismiss it. The birth certificate, however unlikely, was a piece of physical evidence. And Arthur's demeanor, his sincerity, his apparent knowledge of her, it all pointed to something more than a simple scam. She decided to confront her mother again, this time in person. She needed to see her face, to read her body language, to gauge her reaction with her own eyes. She couldn't rely on a phone conversation, not with something this important. Sophia drove to her mother's luxurious penthouse apartment in a prestigious downtown neighborhood. Eleanor Grant was a woman who valued appearances above all else. Her apartment was impeccably decorated, filled with expensive furniture and artwork, a reflection of her refined taste and social status. Eleanor greeted Sophia with a carefully composed smile, her eyes betraying a hint of nervousness. "Sophia, darling, you shouldn't have come. I told you, there's nothing to worry about." "I need to talk to you, Mother," Sophia said, her voice firm. "About Arthur Miller." Eleanor led Sophia to the living room, a spacious, elegantly appointed room with panoramic views of the city skyline. They sat on opposite ends of a plush sofa, the distance between them feeling vast and unbridgeable. "Sophia," Eleanor began, her voice laced with a hint of exasperation, "I don't understand why you're so obsessed with this. The man is clearly unstable. He's probably just looking for attention or money. He had a birth certificate, Mother," Sophia repeated, her voice rising, "with my name on it, and yours, and his. How do you explain that?" Eleanor waved her hand dismissively. "It's a fake, Sophia. A clever forgery. People can create all sorts of documents these days. But why would he go to all that trouble?" Sophia pressed. "What would he gain?" Eleanor hesitated, her eyes flickering away from Sophia's gaze. I don't know," she said, her voice losing some of its confidence. "Maybe he's mentally ill. Maybe he's fixated on you for some reason." Sophia leaned forward, her eyes narrowed. "Mother, are you telling me the truth? Did you ever know a man named Arthur Miller?" Eleanor looked away, her gaze fixed on a distant point in the room. She took a deep breath, and then she spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes," she admitted. "I knew him. A long time ago." Sophia felt a jolt of shock, even though she had suspected it all along. Her mother's admission, however reluctant, confirmed that Arthur wasn't a complete stranger. "Tell me about him," Sophia demanded. Eleanor hesitated again, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. It was a brief relationship," she said, her voice strained. "Before I met your father. I was young, impulsive. It didn't mean anything. But he claims he's my father," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "Is that true?" Eleanor's eyes met Sophia's, and for a moment, Sophia saw a flicker of pain and regret in their depths. But then, the mask of composure slipped back into place. "No, Sophia," Eleanor said firmly. "It's not true. Your father was Richard Grant. He raised you. He loved you. This Arthur, he was just a mistake, a youthful indiscretion. But the birth certificate, I don't know how he got it." Eleanor interrupted, her voice rising in agitation. "Maybe he stole it. Maybe he fabricated it. I don't know. But I'm telling you, Sophia, he's not your father." Sophia studied her mother's face, searching for any sign of deception. But Eleanor's expression was resolute, her eyes unwavering. Sophia wanted to believe her, but the seed of doubt had grown too strong. "I need proof, Mother," Sophia said, her voice cold. "I need something more than your word." Eleanor's composure finally cracked. Her face crumpled, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Sophia, please," she begged. "Don't do this. Don't tear our family apart. Richard was your father. He loved you. This Arthur, he's nothing to you." Sophia felt a pang of sympathy for her mother, but she couldn't let her emotions cloud her judgment. She needed the truth, no matter how painful it might be. "I'm sorry, Mother," Sophia said, standing up. "But I need to know. I need to find out for myself." She turned and walked out of the apartment, leaving her mother weeping on the sofa. The city lights blurred through her tears as she drove back home, her mind consumed by the weight of her mother's partial confession and the looming uncertainty of her own identity. She knew what she had to do next. She had to get a DNA test. The decision to pursue a DNA test weighed heavily on Sophia. It felt like a betrayal of her mother, a rejection of the life she had always known. But the nagging doubt, fueled by Arthur's claim and her mother's evasiveness, was too strong to ignore. She needed certainty, even if it meant shattering the foundations of her past. She researched discreet DNA testing services, choosing a reputable lab that guaranteed confidentiality. She arranged for a kit to be sent to her home and another to the hospital where Arthur was recovering. The process felt clandestine, almost shameful, but she pushed those feelings aside. She had to know the truth. The wait for the results was agonizing. Each day felt like an eternity, filled with a mixture of anticipation and dread. She tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to Arthur, to the birth certificate, to the possibility that her entire life had been based on a lie. She visited Arthur at the hospital several times, their conversations awkward and strained. She still couldn't bring herself to accept his claim, but she couldn't deny the growing sense of connection she felt towards him. He was gentle, kind, and surprisingly insightful. He spoke about his life, his regrets, his longing to have known his daughter. Sophia listened, her heart aching with a mixture of sympathy and confusion. She saw his sincerity, his genuine remorse, but she couldn't reconcile it with the image of her father, Richard Grant, the man who had raised her. Finally, the day arrived when the DNA test results were ready. Sophia received an email notification, her heart pounding in her chest. She hesitated for a moment, her finger hovering over the mouse, afraid of what she might find. She took a deep breath and clicked on the link. The results were displayed on the screen, clear and unequivocal. Probability of paternity, 99.999%. Sophia stared at the numbers, her mind struggling to process the information. It was true. Arthur Miller was her biological father. The life she had known, the identity she had cherished, was shattered. Tears streamed down her face, a mixture of grief, anger, and a strange, unfamiliar sense of relief. Grief for the loss of the father she had known, anger at her mother's deception, and relief at finally knowing the truth. She sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, letting the reality sink in. Arthur was her father. The man she had dismissed as a stranger, a con man, was her biological father. She thought of Arthur, his gentle smile, his sad eyes, his whispered confession. She thought of the years of separation, the lost opportunities, the pain he must have endured. A wave of compassion washed over her, replacing the anger and resentment she had felt towards him. He hadn't abandoned her. He had been kept away from her, denied the chance to know his daughter. Sophia picked up the phone and dialed the hospital. She needed to see Arthur. She needed to tell him the truth. She needed to start building a relationship with the man who was her father. The journey ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and emotional hurdles. But for the first time in a long time, Sophia felt a sense of hope, a glimmer of light in the darkness of her shattered past. She had found her father, and she was determined to make up for lost time. Sophia arrived at the hospital, her heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She had called ahead to let Arthur know she was coming, but she hadn't told him about the DNA test results. She wanted to tell him in person, to see his reaction, to share this momentous moment with him. She found Arthur sitting in a chair by the window, looking out at the city skyline. He looked stronger than he had a few days ago, the color returning to his cheeks. He turned as she entered the room, a tentative smile gracing his lips. "Sophia," he said, his voice still a little weak, but filled with warmth. "It's good to see you." Sophia sat down beside him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. "Arthur," she began, her voice trembling slightly, I have something to tell you. I got the DNA test results." Arthur's eyes widened, his expression shifting from surprise to a cautious hope. He didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. You were right," Sophia said, her voice choked with emotion. "You are my father." Arthur closed his eyes for a moment, a single tear rolling down his cheek. He reached out and took Sophia's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "I knew it," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I knew it in my heart." Sophia squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I should have believed you. I was so confused." "It's all right, Sophia," Arthur said, his voice soothing. "I understand. It's a lot to take in." They sat in silence for a few minutes, holding hands, the weight of the shared truth settling between them. Then Sophia spoke again, her voice filled with a newfound curiosity. "Tell me," she said. "Tell me everything. Tell me about you and my mother. Tell me about your life." Arthur nodded, his gaze drifting back to the window, his eyes filled with the shadows of the past. He began to speak, his voice slow and deliberate, recounting the story of his life, a life filled with love, loss, and a lifetime of regret. "I met your mother, Eleanor, when we were both very young," he began. "I was working as a mechanic, just starting out. She was a student at the university from a wealthy family. We met at a local diner, a place where students and working-class folks like me often cross paths. It was love at first sight, at least for me," he continued, a wistful smile touching his lips. "Eleanor was beautiful, intelligent, and full of life. She had a spark, a rebellious streak that drew me to her. We started dating, secretly at first, because her family wouldn't have approved of me. We spent every moment we could together, stealing kisses in the park, going for drives in my old beat-up car, dreaming of a future together. I was completely in love with her, and I thought she felt the same way. But her family, they had other plans for her," Arthur said, his voice turning bitter. "They wanted her to marry someone from their social circle, someone with money and influence. They saw me as beneath her. When Eleanor told them about me, they were furious. They pressured her, threatened her, even offered me money to disappear. I refused, of course. I loved her. Then Eleanor found out she was pregnant. With you?" Arthur said, his voice trembling. "It should have been a joyous occasion, but it became a nightmare. Her family was even more determined to separate us. They told her that if she kept the baby, they would disown her, cut her off completely. They painted me as an irresponsible, good-for-nothing who would ruin her life. Eleanor was young, scared, and under immense pressure. She made a choice," Arthur said, his voice breaking. "She chose her family, her social standing, over me and our unborn child. She told me she was going to marry Richard Grant, a wealthy businessman her family had arranged for her. She said it was for the best, for my future and the future of our child. I was devastated," Arthur continued, his voice filled with pain. "I begged her to reconsider, but she was resolute. She said she couldn't go against her family, that she couldn't face a life of poverty and social ostracism. I never saw her again after that," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "I was heartbroken, lost. I tried to move on, to forget her, but I never could. I always wondered about our child, about you." Arthur paused, his eyes filled with tears. Sophia reached out and took his hand again, her heart aching for the young man he had been, for the pain he had endured. I kept track of you from afar," Arthur continued, his voice gaining strength. "I read about your accomplishments in the newspapers, saw your picture in magazines. I was so proud of you, Sophia, so proud of the woman you had become. But I never dared to contact you," he said. "I was afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of upsetting your life, afraid of Eleanor's wrath. I thought it was better to stay away, to let you live your life without the burden of knowing about me. But then I saw the job posting at your factory, he said. It was a chance, a desperate hope to be near you, even if you didn't know who I was. And that's how I ended up here. Arthur's story ended, leaving a heavy silence in the room. Sophia sat there, absorbing the weight of his words, the magnitude of his sacrifice, the depth of his love. Her heart ached for the young man he had been, robbed of his love and his child, forced to live a life of quiet regret. She understood now. She understood his quiet demeanor, his gentle nature, his unwavering gaze. He had carried this burden for so long, this secret longing for a daughter he could never know. And now, finally, the truth had been revealed, bringing with it both pain and the possibility of healing. I don't know what to say, Sophia said, her voice choked with emotion. I'm so sorry for what you went through, for what my mother did. Arthur squeezed her hand, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and forgiveness. It's in the past, Sophia, he said. What matters now is that we're here together. We have a chance to build a relationship, to get to know each other. Sophia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I want that, she said. I want to know you, to be your daughter. A tentative smile spread across Arthur's face, a smile that reached his eyes and lit up his entire being. And I want to be your father, Sophia, he said. More than anything. The silence that followed was no longer heavy with unspoken words and hidden pain. It was a silence filled with a nascent hope, a fragile beginning, a promise of a future that neither of them had dared to dream of. Sophia had found her father, and Arthur had found his daughter. The journey ahead would be long and complex, but they were ready to face it together, to heal the wounds of the past and build a new relationship based on truth, love, and forgiveness. After the initial emotional outpouring and Arthur's recounting of his past, a comfortable quiet settled between them. Sophia felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in weeks, a feeling of finally understanding, of connecting with a missing piece of herself. But there were still questions lingering in her mind, details she wanted to understand, pieces of the puzzle that needed to be filled in. Arthur, she began, her voice gentle, tell me more about your decision to work at the factory. How did you even find out about the job? Arthur smiled, a wistful expression in his eyes. It wasn't an accident, Sophia. I'd been keeping tabs on you in a way, reading articles about your success, following Grant Industries' progress. I was incredibly proud of everything you'd accomplished. Sophia was touched by his words, a warmth spreading through her chest. But why the factory? You could have, I don't know, written to me, try to contact me in some other way. Arthur shook his head. I couldn't, Sophia. I was afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of disrupting your life, afraid of your mother's reaction. I knew Eleanor, and I knew how powerful and protective she could be. I didn't want to cause you any trouble. But I longed to be near you, he continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. To see you, even from a distance. To know that you were well, that you were happy. So, I started looking for opportunities, he explained. I searched online for jobs at Grant Industries, specifically at your main factory. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I saw the posting for a quality control inspector, he said. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was perfect. It was a chance to be in the same building as you, to maybe catch a glimpse of you, to feel connected. Sophia remembered the day Arthur collapsed, how she had noticed him on the factory floor, his quiet dedication to his work. She had even made a mental note to commend him. It was a poignant realization, knowing now that he had been there all along, a silent observer, a father watching over his daughter from afar. I was nervous during the interview, Arthur admitted, a chuckle rumbling in his chest. I was afraid they'd see through me, that they'd realize I was too old, too unqualified. But I managed to convince them I was capable. I think my genuine enthusiasm helped. He paused, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. The work was hard, sometimes. My body isn't as young as it used to be. But every day, I went to work with a sense of purpose, a secret hope that I might see you, that you might even notice me. Sophia felt a lump in her throat, imagining Arthur, her father, working diligently on the factory floor, his heart filled with a longing he couldn't express. It was a testament to his love, his quiet devotion, his unwavering hope. "And you did see me," Sophia said, her voice soft. "I saw you that day before you collapsed. I was going to commend you for your work." Arthur's eyes lit up. "You noticed me?" he asked, a hint of disbelief in his voice. Sophia nodded. "I did. I always try to acknowledge the hard work of my employees. I didn't know." She couldn't finish the sentence, the words catching in her throat. She didn't know he was her father. She hadn't known the depth of his connection to her, the silent yearning that had brought him to her factory. "It's all right, Sophia," Arthur said, his voice reassuring. "It's more than I ever expected. Just being near you, knowing that I was in the same building, that was enough." Sophia reached out and took his hand again, her heart overflowing with a mixture of gratitude, love, and a profound sense of wonder at the intricate workings of fate. He had come to her, drawn by an invisible thread, a father's love that had endured for decades. And now, finally, they were together, ready to begin a new chapter, a chapter where they could finally be father and daughter, openly and without fear. The weeks following the revelation were a period of adjustment, a delicate dance of getting to know each other, of building a relationship from the ground up. Sophia visited Arthur regularly at the hospital, and then, after he was discharged, at his small, modest apartment. Their initial conversations were tentative, filled with a mixture of awkwardness and excitement. They talked about their lives, their interests, their hopes and dreams. Sophia learned about Arthur's love of classic literature, his passion for gardening, his quiet, unassuming nature. Arthur learned about Sophia's drive, her ambition, her dedication to her work, and a loneliness that sometimes crept into her seemingly perfect life. Sophia discovered that Arthur was a kind, gentle, and intelligent man, a far cry from the irresponsible, good-for-nothing image her mother had painted of him. She saw his genuine remorse for the past, his deep love for her, and his unwavering commitment to making up for lost time. Slowly, gradually, the walls between them began to crumble. The awkwardness faded, replaced by a growing sense of comfort and familiarity. Sophia found herself looking forward to their visits, to the quiet conversations, the shared laughter, the simple act of being in her father's presence. She started to bring him small gifts, books, a comfortable armchair, a new pair of reading glasses. She helped him tidy up his apartment, adding small touches to make it more comfortable and inviting. She even started cooking him meals, something she rarely did for herself, her busy schedule usually dictating takeout or restaurant dinners. Arthur, in turn, welcomed her into his life with open arms. He showed her old photographs, shared stories about his youth, and listened patiently to her concerns and anxieties. He offered her a different perspective on life, a perspective grounded in simplicity, resilience, and the enduring power of love. Sophia found herself opening up to him in ways she never had with anyone else, not even her closest friends. She talked about her struggles with balancing her work and personal life, her fears of failure, her longing for a deeper connection, a sense of belonging. Arthur listened without judgment, offering words of wisdom and encouragement. He reminded her that success wasn't just about material wealth or professional achievements, but about finding happiness and fulfillment in the simple things in life. The healing process was slow, a gradual thaw after years of frozen emotions. Sophia still struggled with resentment towards her mother, with the years of deception and the lost opportunities to know her father. But with each passing day, with each shared moment, the anger began to subside, replaced by a growing sense of forgiveness and understanding. She realized that Arthur had been a victim of circumstance, just as she had been. He had been denied the chance to be a father, forced to live a life of quiet regret. And now, finally, they had a chance to rewrite their story, to create a new narrative based on truth, love, and acceptance. The relationship wasn't perfect, of course. There were still moments of awkwardness, misunderstandings, and the occasional clash of personalities. But they were committed to working through it, to building a strong and lasting bond. Sophia had found her father, and Arthur had found his daughter. And that, they both realized, was a gift worth cherishing, a second chance at a family they had both longed for. The reconciliation with Arthur inevitably led to another, more difficult confrontation, a reckoning with Eleanor. Sophia had avoided her mother since their last, emotionally charged conversation. She knew she couldn't put it off any longer. She needed to confront Eleanor with the truth, to demand an explanation, and to finally break free from the web of lies that had defined her life. Sophia arranged to meet Eleanor at a neutral location, a quiet, upscale restaurant. She wanted to avoid the emotional baggage of their respective homes, to create a space where they could talk, however difficult the conversation might be. Eleanor arrived looking impeccably dressed, as always, her composure carefully maintained. But Sophia could see the anxiety in her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands. She knew that her mother was dreading this confrontation as much as she was. They ordered their food, making small talk, the tension thick and palpable between them. Finally, after the waiter had left, Sophia took a deep breath and spoke. "Mother," she began, her voice firm but not accusatory, "I know the truth. I've had a DNA test. Arthur Miller is my father." Eleanor's carefully constructed facade crumbled. Her face paled, and her eyes filled with tears. She didn't try to deny it this time. The truth was out, undeniable and irreversible. "Sophia, I don't know what to say," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Say you're sorry," Sophia said, her voice choked with emotion. "Say you're sorry for lying to me, for keeping my father from me, for all the years of pain you caused." Eleanor reached across the table and took Sophia's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I am sorry, Sophia," she said, her voice filled with genuine remorse. "I'm so sorry. I made terrible choices. I was young, selfish, and afraid." "Afraid of what?" Sophia asked, her voice sharp. "Afraid of losing your social standing? Afraid of what your family would think?" Eleanor nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she admitted. "I was afraid of all of that. I was pressured by my parents, by society. I thought I was doing what was best for you, for your future. Best for me," Sophia exclaimed, her voice rising in anger. "How could keeping me from my own father be best for me? How could lying to me my entire life be best for me?" I know," Eleanor said, her voice pleading. "It was wrong. It was a terrible mistake. But I was trapped, Sophia. I felt like I had no other choice." "You always have a choice, Mother," Sophia said, her voice softening slightly. "You chose your own comfort, your own social status, over my happiness, over my right to know my father." Eleanor didn't try to defend herself. She knew Sophia was right. She had made a selfish choice, and she had lived with the guilt and regret ever since. "I can't undo the past, Sophia," Eleanor said, her voice heavy with sadness. "But I can try to make amends. I can try to be a better mother to you now." Sophia looked at her mother, her heart aching with a mixture of anger and pity. She saw the genuine remorse in her eyes, the deep regret that had haunted her for years. She realized that Eleanor, too, had been a victim, a prisoner of her own upbringing and the societal pressure she had faced. "I don't know if I can ever fully forgive you, Mother," Sophia said, her voice honest and raw. "But I'm willing to try. I'm willing to move forward." Eleanor's face lit up with a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Sophia," she said, her voice filled with gratitude. "That's all I ask. But you need to meet Arthur," Sophia said. "You need to apologize to him, too. He deserves that." Eleanor hesitated, her eyes widening in apprehension. I don't know if I can face him, Sophia," she said. "It's been so long. He must hate me." "He doesn't hate you, Mother," Sophia said. "He's a kind, forgiving man. He just wants to move on, to have a relationship with his daughter." Eleanor took a deep breath, steeling herself. "All right," she said. "I'll do it. For you." And for him. The meeting between Eleanor and Arthur was awkward and tense, a stark contrast to the warmth and growing closeness between Sophia and Arthur. They met at Sophia's house, a neutral ground where she could mediate and provide support. Eleanor apologized to Arthur, her voice trembling with emotion. She acknowledged her mistakes, her selfishness, and the pain she had caused him. Arthur listened patiently, his expression unreadable. He accepted her apology, but there was a distance in his eyes, a lingering sadness that couldn't be easily erased. The conversation was brief and strained. There was no magical reconciliation, no sudden forgiveness. But it was a start. It was an acknowledgement of the past, a willingness to move forward, however tentatively. Eleanor left soon after, leaving Sophia and Arthur alone. The air felt lighter, the tension dissipated. "That was difficult," Sophia said, letting out a sigh. Arthur nodded. "It was," he agreed, "but it was necessary." Do you forgive her?" Sophia asked, her voice hesitant. Arthur looked at Sophia, his eyes filled with a quiet wisdom. "Forgiveness is a process, Sophia," he said. "It takes time. I don't know if I can ever fully forget what happened, but I could try to let go of the anger and resentment. For my own sake, and for yours." Sophia understood. Forgiveness wasn't a switch that could be flipped, but a journey, a gradual process of healing and acceptance. And she knew, with a certainty that warmed her heart, that they would all embark on that journey together, slowly, tentatively, but with a shared hope for a brighter future. With the difficult confrontation with Eleanor behind them, Sophia and Arthur focused on building their own relationship. They spent more and more time together, gradually weaving themselves into the fabric of each other's lives. Sophia helped Arthur find a new living situation. His small apartment was cramped and inconvenient, and she wanted him to be closer to her. She found a comfortable assisted living facility a short drive from her home, a place with spacious rooms, beautiful gardens, and a vibrant community of residents. Arthur was initially hesitant, resistant to the idea of leaving his familiar surroundings. He was a fiercely independent man, used to taking care of himself. But Sophia gently persuaded him, emphasizing the benefits of the facility, the social opportunities, and the peace of mind it would give both of them. He eventually agreed, and the move proved to be a positive change. Arthur thrived in his new environment. He made friends, participated in activities, and enjoyed the companionship of others his age. He still maintained his independence, but he had the support and security he needed. Sophia visited him regularly, often several times a week. They would have dinner together, go for walks in the gardens, or simply sit and talk. They shared stories, laughed, and sometimes cried. They were slowly but surely building a bond, a father-daughter relationship that had been denied to them for so long. Sophia introduced Arthur to her small circle of friends, who welcomed him with open arms. They saw the genuine connection between them, the love and respect that was growing stronger with each passing day. Arthur, in turn, shared his wisdom and life experiences with Sophia. He encouraged her to slow down, to appreciate the simple things in life, to find a balance between her work and her personal well-being. He reminded her that true happiness wasn't found in material possessions or professional success, but in the relationships she nurtured and the love she shared. Sophia listened, taking his words to heart. She started to make changes in her life, delegating more responsibilities at work, taking more time for herself, and prioritizing her relationships with Arthur and her friends. She discovered a newfound sense of peace and contentment, a feeling of wholeness she hadn't realized she was missing. Arthur had brought a sense of balance to her life, a grounding influence that helped her to appreciate the present moment and to let go of the anxieties and pressures that had consumed her for so long. They celebrated holidays together, birthdays, and other special occasions. They created new traditions, new memories, filling the void left by the years of separation. It wasn't always easy. There were still moments of awkwardness, misunderstandings, and the occasional reminder of the past. But they navigated those challenges with patience, understanding, and a growing love for each other. Sophia had found her father, and Arthur had found his daughter. And in finding each other, they had both found a missing piece of themselves, a sense of belonging and completeness that had eluded them for far too long. The future stretched before them, filled with possibilities, a future they would face together as father and daughter. The final chapter of Sophia and Arthur's story wasn't marked by any grand, dramatic events. It was a quiet culmination, a gentle settling into a new rhythm of life, a rhythm defined by acceptance, forgiveness, and a deep, abiding love. Sophia continued to excel in her career, but her priorities had shifted. She no longer defined herself solely by her professional achievements. She found joy and fulfillment in her relationship with Arthur, in the simple act of spending time with him, sharing meals, conversations, and laughter. She made a conscious effort to create a better work-life balance, delegating more responsibilities, taking more time for herself, and nurturing her friendships. She discovered that she was a more effective leader when she was well-rested, grounded, and emotionally balanced. Arthur's influence had subtly but profoundly transformed her approach to life. Arthur, in turn, thrived in his new environment. He embraced the community at the assisted living facility, forming close friendships with other residents. He participated in activities, rediscovered old hobbies, and even started a small garden, his green thumb bringing forth a vibrant array of flowers and vegetables. He found a sense of purpose and belonging, a feeling of being part of something larger than himself. He was no longer the lonely, isolated man he had been. He was surrounded by friends, supported by caring staff, and loved by his daughter. Sophia and Arthur's relationship continued to deepen. They learned to navigate their differences, to communicate openly and honestly, and to forgive each other's imperfections. They built a foundation of trust and respect, a bond that could withstand the inevitable challenges of life. Sophia's relationship with Eleanor remained complex. While Eleanor had apologized and made an effort to connect with Arthur, the wounds of the past were slow to heal. Sophia found it difficult to fully trust her mother, to completely let go of the resentment she had harbored for so long. However, she made a conscious effort to maintain a civil relationship with Eleanor, for Arthur's sake and for her own peace of mind. They would occasionally have dinner together or attend family gatherings, but the warmth and closeness they had once shared were gone. Sophia had accepted that their relationship would likely never be the same, but she had found a way to coexist, to acknowledge their shared history without letting it define their present. Arthur, on the other hand, had found a measure of peace and forgiveness towards Eleanor. He understood the pressure she had faced, the difficult choices she had made. He held no animosity towards her, recognizing that they had both been victims of circumstance. He was grateful for the opportunity to know his daughter, and he didn't want to dwell on the pain of the past. As the years passed, Sophia and Arthur continued to build their life together, creating new memories, sharing joys and sorrows, and supporting each other through thick and thin. They had found a sense of belonging, a feeling of family that had eluded them for so long. The story ends not with a dramatic climax, but with a quiet sense of contentment, a feeling of wholeness and fulfillment. Sophia had found her father, and Arthur had found his daughter. They had healed the wounds of the past, embraced the present, and created a future filled with love, forgiveness, and the enduring power of family. They had learned that even the most broken relationships could be mended, that second chances were possible, and that love, in its purest form, could conquer all. They were simply at peace,